Thank you for joining us tonight. It's really wonderful to see all of you. This is the July 8th, 2024 meeting of the Westerville City Schools Board of Education, and this evening's agenda will be displayed on the screens in the front of the room. Printed agendas are available at the back of the room, or you may find the agenda on your mobile device by connecting to the district's website at www.wcsoh.org. Click on the Our District link and select Board of Education and follow the board docs link to our current meeting agenda. There will be two opportunities to address the board this evening, the first being agenda item 7.01. The first set of comments is relative to agenda items 8.01 through 12.04. Please state the agenda items you're referencing at the beginning of your comments. The second opportunity is agenda item 13.01. There's a sign-up sheet in the back of the room at the table. Each speaker will have 5 minutes to address the board. A timer will be shown on the screen. And with that, Ms. Marshall, will you please call the roll?
Mrs. Davidson?
Here.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Here.
Mrs. Valentine?
Here.
Mrs. Ottman?
Here.
Mrs. Meyer?
Here. Would you please join us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There are no district highlights, so moving along to the superintendent's report. Ms. Hamburg.
All right, thank you. I'm actually going to go up to the podium and have a few folks join me tonight for our strategic plan presentation. All right, good evening. While we're getting that pulled up, board members, you should have a copy of the plan at your spot, as well as you, Ms. Marshall. I want to start by introducing our consultants with the Impact Group, Phil Herman and Tom Speaks. They are going to be helping to present here in just a moment. And they're going to give a quick overview of the process that we went through, and then I'm really excited to see so many of our committee members, and I want to take a moment to recognize them after they kind of introduce the process.
Thank you, Ms. Hamburg. This evening for the strategic plan presentation, we will be obviously doing the introduction. We're going to look at the foundational documents. So Westerville was really clear with us when we began that there are some core elements and some work that has already been done that, that you would like to see guide the strategic plan. And so we'll reintroduce those foundational documents. We'll look at the strategic planning process and introduce the committee, many of the members who are here this evening. And then we'll get into what are the priorities and objectives. So we'll look at how we got there to the priorities and objectives, and then we'll have team members share an overview of those priorities and each of the objectives. Lastly, we'll wrap up with what are some of the next steps? Where do we go from here in regard to the strategic plan, and answer any questions that you have as a board.
So good evening. As you recall, we first began to build our Portrait of a Graduate in 2017. And we developed the 6 competencies: social emotional wellness, adaptability, problem solving, collaboration, critical thinking, and communication. And those skills which will prepare our students to contribute to the competitive and changing world in which we live, which our mission statement asks us to do. Our essential elements create the environment with which these competencies and our grade level standards are all taught in every classroom in our system. And together, they comprise our educational framework, which is the foundation of this strategic plan.
That's just a graphic with a little more detail on what Scott just spoke about. Okay, the next piece that we shared with our strategic planning committee was an overview. Carrie Dennis, our business manager, spent one of the evenings getting really in depth, and we've also done that for the board at one of our work sessions, so you're all familiar with that presentation. but we made sure that our committee was aware of our 10-year facilities master plan. I know it's hard to read on there, but just to give you an idea. And then we spent a lot of time getting feedback from them that we were able then to share with the board before you voted on that next phase. But we thought it was really important that they had the grounding in not only those educational documents, but also in what we were trying to do with our capital projects and our facilities. Okay, I do want to take a moment, and if you are, when I say your name, if you're here, could you please stand? And I do want to take a moment and do this because I think it's really important. When I tell you that these people gave a lot of time for this process, it was a lot of time, and I think there was one evening when it rained, but I think the rest of the time it was like the most beautiful weather you could ever imagine, like in May when everybody just wanted to be outside. 2.5-hour meetings. One night, poor Jennifer had ordered us pizza and it got delivered to the South concession stand. But other than that, we did feed them. We did get them some food that night as well. So it was a great time. The engagement was really, really strong, and I'm just super appreciative. The first meeting of this process was actually on my 3rd day of work. So I couldn't have asked for a better group to come in and just really kind of give feedback, get me up to speed, and just help drive this process from a community standpoint. So again, if you could just, I know not everyone is here, but I do want to say everyone's name, and we'll be reading some of this for the benefit of anyone watching this from the recording as well, so that you can hear who was on the committee. Ann Baldwin, Jack Brown, Amy Clifton, Mark Cooper, Jessica Diallo, Frank Dobson, Adam Flugie, Carly Foy, Aaron Frankauer, Linda Freeman Walker, Gertie Glass, Angie Goff, Lynn Harvey, Laura Hendricks, Patrick Hickman, Ryan Hilperts, Valerie Jasinski, Dr. Jennifer Knapp, Jesse Martin, Dr. Michelle Martin, Diaga Mabouge, Stephen McElroy, Olivia Mendlow, Celeste Miller, Kelly Modlick, Steve Munger, Dr. Nancy Nestor Baker, Eric Nickel, Sarah Novak, Amanda Osendorf, Meg Patton, Adam Porsche, Cheryl Welford, Latrice Reeves, Navia Robinson, Tammy Santa, Brian Shaw, Dr. Anitra Simmons, Shar Smith, Shelley Smith, Mark Smolik, Tim Stifler, Tabby Swain, Brianna Swanson, Doug Swartz, Kate Toma, Louise Valentine, Casey Walco, Katie Weber, Tracy White, Jennifer Winters, Molly Woodruff, Ken Wright, and Becca Yanni. In addition to those folks, we also had all of our members of the cabinet, if you're in here, would stand as well, that helped facilitate those groups. All right, so let's have a big round of applause for our planning committee. Additionally, we had originally aimed for our last board meeting to bring this to you, as you remember, but our committee gave us such good feedback at our last meeting. We felt like we needed to take a little more time with the revision on the objectives. We felt like the content of the objectives was in alignment with where it needed to be, but the feedback on some of our verbiage and our education needs was very well taken. And so we did move this a meeting, and still we have this great of a turnout. So just super appreciative to people giving up their evening here in July to come and spend the evening with us. So thank you. Phil? There we go.
So I'm going to give a quick overview of the process. You might remember when Tom and I were with you in February, we ran through the anticipated process for the strategic plan development. And for the most part, that was the process that we followed. There were a few places, and it happens in any strategic plan, where the process starts to get a little bit messy. The feedback is coming in. You're trying to decide on what the overarching priorities are, how we're going to organize it, how we're going to align all the different feedback that we're hearing. And this process was no different. We ran into some of those same bumps. And again, huge thank you to the committee members who would work through that with us and provide such enthusiastic feedback every single time we asked them to reflect in one of the meetings on the information that was put before them, and to think about it critically. They did so with just full participation and enthusiasm. And then additionally, members of the cabinet, members of the administrative team, the board representatives, provided excellent feedback to us as well, and that really, really helped us continue to move through the process and ultimately generate the results you see before you this evening. The committee process, the committee met 5 times, and we began, again, those first 3 meetings where we really were exploring some of those foundational elements. So the very first meeting, we dug in on understanding the educational framework, mission, vision, and values of the Westerville City Schools. And in each one of the meetings, there was a time for learning or reflection or understanding the themes or results that the committee had produced in the previous meeting. But then there's also opportunities for the committee to engage with one another and provide feedback to us as facilitators based on what they had heard, either to elaborate on information that we needed more understanding from those participants, or to actually work on the work themselves in terms of developing some of the wording around priorities or objectives. And so in this first meeting, we focused on that educational framework and the mission, vision, and values of the school district. And then we asked the committee, what does Westerville City Schools most need to focus on in the next 3 years to promote the values and competencies represented in the portrait of a graduate, and to prepare our students to be competitive and prepared for the world they will enter when they leave Westerville City Schools. And that's one example of some of the activities that they participate in through the process. Additionally, in that first meeting, they also began the SWOT process, the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so the committee also provided us the strengths of Westerville City Schools at that point. In between meetings, we always compiled all the information that we heard and generated the themes so that we could begin listening for, are there common themes from either community input or the members of the committee that are continuing to surface throughout, and how do we organize those and prioritize those? In the second meeting, again, our opportunity for learning there was understanding the facilities master plan. And Carrie Dennis gave the overview of the facilities master plan at this meeting. And this meeting actually timed up with just before the board considering phase 2 of the facility master plan. You might remember, and so we were not only able to have the committee understand the importance of that plan over the recent years and where the district is headed, and and to reflect on what could that mean for the establishment of the priorities and the objectives in this plan, but also they were able to provide some instant feedback that we were able to share with you as the board was considering what components are considered in phase 2 of the master facilities plan or facility master plan, and what's not included in that. In the third meeting, in the second meeting, we also began the weaknesses of the SWOT analysis. We were able to focus on that. Where am I supposed to be pointing this?
Can you advance it, Jennifer, please?
Thank you. In the third meeting, we looked at the analysis and insights from the 3Q meetings. So in the fall and in the winter, Dr. Clark and members of the administrative team had a whole series of meetings with internal members of the school community, external members of the school community, asking about what they like about the schools, what they see as the challenges of the school district, as well as they're interested, what are their interests in the characteristics of a superintendent. And so those likes and challenges were all compiled by the administrative team into primary themes. And then we were able to engage the committee in looking at that information and to ask them to also look at the summary of themes and to provide feedback on what did they see as those top priorities from all the information that had been collected from those meetings? And why do they believe that those particular themes evolved from our stakeholders? So we were able to go deeper into that data with the members of the committee that were also representing so many different positions and roles within the community and within the schools. Again, when we have these engaging conversations every time and collect all that information, we begin to see overarching themes. And what was interesting is the themes that we heard from the committee were also aligning with the themes that came from those questions, or those 3Q meetings, which is great when we see that, because it's a nice confirmation across the board that that's how people in the community feel. From there, between the third and fourth meeting, we had an opportunity to work with the cabinet and the Board of Education representatives, where we looked at all the information that we had before us and those themes that we're surfacing to begin to establish the overarching priorities. And at that point, we established 5 priorities to bring back to the committee. We brought those 5 priorities, and we asked for feedback on those priorities, and we asked the committee to begin writing objectives based on everything that they had learned so far and that they had already talked about. They began writing the objectives for each of those priorities, the first draft of those objectives. Each of the subgroups of the committee began working on objectives that evening. Then all the committees rotated through and looked at the work of each of the other subcommittees that evening. We did a gallery walk, and they provided instant feedback. And then the subcommittees that evening had a chance to rewrite their objectives. So we had 2 swipes at it in the very first time of our first drafts of the creation of the objectives. And in the weeks that followed that, as we began to work with the cabinet, the district leadership team, members of the teaching and learning team, members of the different departments, we got feedback about these priorities, so these and the objectives. So these were the first draft priorities that you can see, those 5 that were up there on the left side. And as we were looking at the objectives that were written, it became pretty clear that many of the objectives aligned with the essential elements of quality instruction. And there was a really important conversation with the leadership team in those different groups and the board representatives to say, are we missing an opportunity to align the strategic plan to one of the really guiding documents and foundational documents of the school district? And are we creating confusion by having a strategic plan and also having the educational framework? And which one are we following? Are we working towards the educational framework? Or are we following a strategic plan? Particularly when so many of the objectives align to the educational framework. And so we said, well, wait a minute, let's pause and look at these objectives and align these objectives and see, do they all have a home underneath those essential elements? And most of them had a home underneath the essential elements and helped advance that work. But not all of them had a home. As we began to realize that it was some of the elements that were really around finance, facilities, the communication and transparency. Some of those objectives are really more about supporting those first 3 priorities. And so what we ended up doing was saying the overarching priorities have already been created in the essential elements of high quality instruction as part of the educational framework, but there's a 4th, and that's really about managing resources to support the implementation of the educational framework. And so that took us back then to revising those objectives and multiple more swipes. So we brought those objectives back to the committee overall. They really liked the alignment and felt as though the content that had been created in the plan absolutely captured all that they had learned and all they had discussed and the feedback that they had heard from the community. But we had some work to do on the objective language. They felt as though the swipe at that point was two educational leads, was speaking too high, using too many terms, and was too wordy. And so there was strong encouragement to whittle those down and to bring those objectives in tighter. And that was the work that we have been doing between the last meeting and this evening. In that fifth meeting, again, these are some of the reflection questions that we asked of the committee that helped us come to those results. Tom's going to talk to you for just a moment about what is before you tonight in the plan in terms of priorities, objectives, and some of the subcomponents in terms of the work ahead.
Thanks, Phil. So you're going to continue to see throughout this entire process priorities, objectives, action steps. This plan has 4 priorities. There are 17 objectives. A priority is a high-level focus area in an organization that identifies what is critical to its long-term success. An objective is a specific measurable goal or target an organization sets to achieve its priorities. This is what you're voting on this evening. This is the strategic direction of the district that everyone has weighed in upon, which is excellent. So we're ready to go. The next piece here, hit this. The next piece is the action steps. Okay, so an action step, this is tactical. And actually, your leadership team began to get into this today. This is who is doing what, when, and how is it measurable, right? This is the rubber meeting the road. So the action steps, understand that is actually the plan itself. This is the plan over the next year is this occurring. And the main steps which we're establishing this for are the baseline, recommendations, implementation, and measurement. So baseline, we need to first establish for each of these objectives, where are we right now? What's going well? What do we need to improve? Where are we right now to establish that baseline? We establish a date for that. The next is recommendations. From our baseline, what do we have to do specifically to go from our baseline to the intent of the objective? Implementation, when do we begin to implement this? And then measurement, when do we measure to report out the fact that we are indeed meeting that objective? As we move forward, you're going to see in the next weeks and months as the administration begins to build specific timelines and ownership of those, that'll be made available to you all. But this is how we're going to roll it out moving forward.
All right, so with that, and there are copies of the plan in the back. If you did not get one and you would like one, board members and Ms. Marshall, as I said, you should already have one at your seat. We are going to go through and just share, and for the sake of the streaming, we are going to read these, but I would also advise you, if you go to the agenda online, there is a PDF of this presentation and of the plan, so if community members want to see either of those documents, they are available. And with that, Gertie Glass is going to read through our first set of objectives for safe and inclusive environments. WCS staff are trusted adults who develop and provide spaces that are physically and mentally safe, values diversity and student authenticity. As a result, students are seen, heard, celebrated, and are able to thrive, grow, and take risks.
Objective number 1.1, promote the development of the whole child and cultivate relationships among students, staff, families, and the community. Objective 1.2, create accessible learning environment to ensure every student feels empowered and experiences a sense of belonging through a culture of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Objective 1.3, develop and implement clear and consistent two-way communication systems and accessible formats to inform and engage internal and external members of the school community. Objective 1.4, implement recruiting, hiring, and retention practices to secure a high-quality staff that is more reflective of the diversity of our students. Objective 1.5, implement a comprehensive system of support for employees to include training, mentorship, clear communication of expectations and opportunities for collaboration and leadership. Objective 1.6, establish clear standards and metrics to evaluate safety, functionality, inclusivity, and quality assurance protocols within our learning and working environments.
Thank you, Gertie. And we are going to have a Q&A session at the end for the board, but I do want to pause after each of the priorities and just see if you have any initial questions on the objectives in that section. Okay. Great, we'll move on to priority 2. We have student-centered learning. WCS staff facilitate student learning focused on the individual and collective needs of students, shared responsibility for learning and alignment to grade level standards, while creating opportunities for student voice, choice, and interests. Student-centered learning results in empowering students to be contributors of ideas, solutions, and talents in their local and global communities. 2.1, implement a multi-tiered system of supports, which is often referred to as MTSS, and you can see we've linked in, since that's a big education term, there's a link there, so if you go to the online version, which we will have this on our website after you hopefully approve it, so folks can go in and get a little bit better idea of what that is, because that will be a huge focus area for us over the next couple of years. But an MTSS framework to address academic, behavioral, and social emotional growth. And this is a good time to pause and just say, one of the things, we obviously talked about wanting to ground these objectives in the documents we already have, but an important piece too was that we were including work that was already started. So you're not seeing in front of you 17 brand new objectives. Hey staff, by the way, here you go. A lot of these things our staff members are already working on, our teams are already working on. So this is in various phases of implementation throughout our buildings, and depending on if it's the academic, behavior, or social emotional growth side. So we want a system, a systemic system that we can use across the district. Create family and community engagement opportunities to enhance learning experiences for our students and encourage a sense of belonging and unity. Provide ongoing professional development for all staff focused on culturally responsive practices that promote student achievement, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And again, I'll pause there to see if you have any questions so far on objective 2 or priority 2. All right. Next up, priority 3, which is clear evidence and application of learning. And our Deputy Superintendent, Scott Dorn, is going to share these objectives. WCF staff provides students various opportunities and options to demonstrate growth, understanding, and mastery of the grade level standards through regular formative and summative feedback, and help students connect that learning to their future path through and beyond pre-K-12 education.
Objective 3.1, provide all students opportunities to demonstrate the application of critical thinking, innovative problem solving, and collaboration through learning experiences relevant to the demands of the modern workforce. Objective 3.2, provide all students with choices in a variety of future pathways and options to demonstrate mastery of grade level standards. And Objective 3.3, develop processes to evaluate the effectiveness of programming and resource allocation, prioritizing impact on student learning.
And I just wanted to add and highlight that last one is one that Nicole and Scott and I have been talking about a lot. Scott, we attended a workshop the state put on that gave us a really good tool for that. And so, you know, as we look at our continual challenges with state funding, other revenue sources, and growing needs that our students have, we really want to make sure that we have a strategic, systemic way of looking at the programs we have, evaluating the impact they're having on kids and what they're costing us. And so that's going to be a big area that we're planning to focus on this year. So I'm really excited about that. Questions on 3? All right, cruising right along. Number 4. And I love this little icon that they made. So I just want to point out that it's juggling the 3 other icons. So manage resources responsibly to support the educational framework. WCS staff are dedicated to advancing the educational framework through strategic initiatives and sound financial practices. Our efforts will promote financial stewardship, transparency, and accountability while aligning with educational goals, community expectations, regulatory requirements, and sustainability principles. Objective 4.1, develop and integrate technology systems for data collection, analysis, and reporting to showcase the effectiveness of district initiatives. 4.2, Utilize a comprehensive resource allocation framework that aligns budgetary decisions with the district's values and strategic priorities. And again, I just want to emphasize, it's not that we're not doing any of this, it's being more strategic about how we do it moving forward. 4.3, promote financial stewardship, transparency, and accountability to ensure all financial activities support the district's mission and strategic goals. 4.4, ensure the district remains responsive and resilient to changing demographics, technology, educational needs, and resource availability. And we had a lot of great conversation around this one with the committee and especially the community members on this one. So I think that's a really exciting objective for us to make sure that we're staying on top of all the current changes. And 4.5, align the facilities master plan with educational goals, community expectations, regulatory requirements, and sustainability principles while addressing the school district's current and future needs and enhancing operational efficiency. So there you have all the objectives. We'll have, like I said, a general question session here in a moment, but any questions on priority 4 with the managing of resources?
I just have one on objective 4.2, because I know everyone worked really hard to get the language. It's very understandable. So I'm just wondering, Ms. Marshall, since, we talked about how we already have, we're already working on all these, but we're going to continue to make them more systemic. Can you just talk to people sort of in English about resource allocation framework and what that means to you, what we're already doing in that regard? And I'm just trying to make it really understandable.
Yeah, so I think the best way to sort of explain that is to just sort of talk about what we're already doing. So we continually look at the 5-year forecast. As you know, I bring it to the board twice a year, but it is a document that's updated periodically throughout the year as we go through different planning phases and things like that. We start our conversations around the next year's budget cycle in January. All of our departments and buildings receive spreadsheets. They are creating their goals in their buildings and departments, and they're aligning all of their resources and their budgetary needs based on what they're creating. And that's based on whatever our district goal is and how all of that models through. And so that is something that we're currently doing. We continue to have opportunities for adjustments throughout the year as we know things can change. We have 2 periods during the year specifically where they can sort of move money between accounts and things like that as the needs change and that sort of thing. So that's what we do now. I think that this fits right in line with that. It's just sort of memorializing it in a document and what we currently do.
I think too, as we are adopting these strategic objectives, it gives us an opportunity to have a conversation with Nicole and her team about, are we allocating the resources? So if our community says one of these is a priority and we're not really allocating resources toward it, then maybe we need to look at another area where we can move some resources. And so I think it helps us make sure that we're putting our resources where we say our priorities are.
Yeah, and I do just want to mention, like, those conversations around the budget, so they start in January. They all receive spreadsheets, but each individual department and building, they're meeting with their teams to work together to develop that budget. We go into each of the buildings and each of the departments and meet with all of them and go over it. It's me, the deputy superintendent, our assistant treasurer, my fiscal coordinator. We sit down and we look at where are the gaps, what are you looking at for next year, what are your goals, and we have all of those conversations as part of those meetings, and they're working with their team before we ever get to that spot. So
Great. Thank you for walking through that, because I know one of the things I've really appreciated learning about the last few years, and you've put a lot of effort into, is doing those building meetings and making sure they're face-to-face and you really have a sit-down, with building leadership. And so I think it's just important that people understand how you're already working towards, what that framework looks like now, but appreciate too, thinking about in the future, looking even more closely now that we have the rest of the strategic plan in place how to align with it. So thanks for walking through that.
Yeah, and I will say, like, every department does this, right? So the teaching and learning team, they're meeting with the building principals and their directors and coordinators as they're thinking about their goals and their allocation of resources for the next year. I know Carrie and Doug visit with all of the building principals to talk about what's needed for facilities and those sorts of things. So I think as an organization, we do this at every level, all throughout the organization. So.
And you will see other objectives again in here that we wanted to make sure, to Nicole's point, we memorialized them because we didn't want them to fall off. It wasn't like, oh, we're replacing them with other priorities. This should always be a priority for us. Any other questions on objectives under priority 4? All right.
So next steps. We hope that the board will approve the plan this evening. If the board approves the plan this evening, we move forward with the identification of chairs and co-chairs for each objective. Chairs and co-chairs for each objective are typically members of the administrative team or leaders within the school district staff that become the champion of that objective. It doesn't mean they're the czar of that objective. They're not driving it all by themselves. It means that they're making sure that those steps that Tom went over, the baseline, the recommendations, the implementation, the measures, that they're bringing the right people to the table to keep advancing that work, that we're sticking to the timelines that we established for that work. So establishment of chairs and co-chairs, and then establishing the timeline. What are the timelines? What are the timelines for the baseline and the recommendations? Typically, then you establish the timelines for the implementation later. You don't really know exactly when you're going to be implementing those particular objectives until you've had an opportunity to say, what are you recommending? Where are we today, and what are we recommending to advance that work from where we are today? And so we established those baseline and recommendation timelines, and then eventually the implementation and measurement timelines. And then the teams get to work. Those 4 action steps for each of those objectives, that is the work of the plan in the coming years. And as Mrs. Hamburg already pointed out, some of those objectives are continuation of work that's underway. And so it's going to be easier to establish a baseline and the recommendations because you're already doing some of that, some of the work that's represented in this plan. Others will have a longer leeway and a longer run-up. And here's the other thing. There are 17 objectives, and it's intended to be a multi-year plan. You can't do it all at once. And so there should be some of these priorities that take a longer term or a longer runway to actually get really underway with them. And then periodic updates to the Board of Education and to the community. And so I think Mrs. Hamburg was talking about quarterly updates on the strategic plan. That would be typical for many school districts who are implementing strategic plan to provide quarterly updates. How are we doing? How are we doing in terms of making the progress on our baseline? And ultimately, what are our recommendations? And where are we in implementing these steps? And so that's what's coming next. And that's what really over the course of coming months, but also years. Any other points you want to talk about next steps?
We just shared too that we plan on rolling all of this out at our all admin retreat on July 31st, and then more importantly to our entire staff at Convocation on August 9th. So we can get everybody on the same page with where we want to focus our work. Questions? Comments?
Well, I want to start by thanking everybody for all of this work and the thoughtfulness that went into it, the time that people put into it. Really appreciate that we were able to get feedback, in real time as we're making decisions as a board too. So thank you all for taking your time during the summer too to come here tonight as well. I do just have one question. I appreciate that we're going to be doing quarterly updates. I'm wondering if there's some, and I know that we haven't gotten that far yet because we haven't moved towards the implementation and the actions and all that. But if there's some sort of visual that we would be able to be put up online, just so if somebody was curious of how we're doing, just check in, and if that would be possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Greg and his team have been involved in this process, and so I would be leaning heavily on them to help us create those visuals so that we can keep our community updated. We've also talked about, I know Phil's team is planning on making us a, would you say, like 11 by 17 document that kind of has a visual of these. And then we talked about like being able to simplify some of that language to where we can also have that translated into some of our main languages for our families as well, and be able to put that online too. So that we thought that was an important priority and was brought up several times by our committee about making sure everybody had access.
That's great. And also, I just want to say thanks for like not creating 17 new things and really bringing everything that we have together into one document. It's really exciting.
I really appreciate the opportunity to have watched the process. And I thank both of you, I thank all of our team, and I certainly want to echo what Christy was saying, thank everyone who chose to work on the committee. And beyond that, I so appreciate that this is not a plan that was created in a vacuum. It's not a theoretical plan. Theoretical plans look lovely, and they can have great visuals. But if they're not grounded in the work that's already been going on, if they're not grounded in the community itself, they're nothing more than something pretty. So this is not that kind of strategic plan. This is the kind of strategic plan that, as I've said to some of you before, is triangulated. It focuses on the information that we have, the work we've been doing, and what our community members and our staff members have been saying. This aligns all of those pieces and creates out of all of those many easel sheets and all of those sticky red dots and all of those 3Q conversations, it brings all of those pieces together. And that is a difficult thing to do, but you've done it very, very well, and I heartily commend you, all of you, for the work that you did to create this real life plan. Thank you.
So I just want to say thank you. Thank you for everyone that was involved in your time and your talent that you shared. I am super excited to watch this come to fruition. And if there's anything I can do to help support that, please let me know. I'm all in.
I have, well, a couple of things. Like everybody else, I want to express my gratitude. I mean, it is not easy, especially those of you with kids and families, to pull yourself away to come and talk about strategic plans in the summer on a lovely evening. So really thank you. My question really is for the impact group, because I always think it's great when you have the opportunity to get an outside perspective on your school district to take a moment to do that. And you all probably worked with lots of districts on strategic plans, and every district has its own sort of personality. And this might sound like a weird sort of generic question, but I'm really curious about what strikes you about Westerville, right? That's like, we don't know the water we swim in, so tell us what it looks like.
Yeah,
How
well,
are we different, unique? What are we?
So one of the things I was really struck by, and Tom, feel free to jump in here as well. One of the things I was struck by was the sense of community, collective community, even in a district that has multiple high schools. And sometimes when we work in districts with multiple high schools, there's not that same sense of collective community, the We Are Westerville. And you have that, which is something that's really, really powerful and should be cherished here. And I don't even know if you know that that's not a thing in other places, right? But it's in some cases it's not a thing. Certainly. You have an amazing team. I mean, I have, the next slide says thank you, and there's some thank yous I wanted to say, of course, to the Board of Education for the opportunity to do this work, but also to the committee members who were representative of the community. And again, the level of enthusiasm and engagement for the schools, for the work that the schools are doing, was, typically attendance falls off in a lot of places we work. You get that first meeting, and then attendance falls off. Attendance didn't fall off here, and I was worried about it every time with those nice sunny days that she was talking about. I was worried every time, and attendance never fell off. And there was that level of engagement, and that speaks very powerfully as well. The other thing that really, really stood out to me was the foundational documents, right? So that educational framework with the essential elements of high-quality instruction, the portrait of a graduate, and all that had been done already within the school district, plus the master facilities plan, our facilities master plan. That's unusual to have that be that clear on the educational framework and what you're desiring to do instructionally. And so it was really kind of a little bit of a challenging process because I wish we would have had that vision to more closely align this earlier. But once we realized this strategic plan is actually aligning to so well to the work that's already been done, it really became fun at that point to align those objectives. So those are some things that just immediately jump out for me.
I agree with everything Phil said, with the added addition of civility. We do a lot of work throughout Ohio and beyond, and there were some very diverse opinions here. There's some different people with different ideas, and everyone, they addressed things with kindness and with thoughtfulness, and everyone had an opportunity to say what was on their hearts, and it was respected, and that's not always the case. So once again, it's a high-performing district with a lot of really intelligent and thoughtful people, and what struck me is just civility and sense of community. It was really an honor to be a part of it.
Thank you. Thanks. And I went to I went to school here back when the North-South rivalry was a real thing. So I'm just glad we're in a new space.
And I think, Phil, you said you started your thank yous, but did you have anything else you wanted to add there?
I did also, in addition to the Board of Education and the committee members, I did want to thank the cabinet has been so enthusiastic and supportive and helpful for any questions that I had, clarification that I need, history, background, been really helpful. Especially working with Nicole and Scott Dorn and Angie. You guys have been amazing as far as just the support for me. Nicole, I think, was my first support and the first cell phone number I had, and unfortunately she just had to keep pointing me to other people because she was the only cell phone number I had at first. But I just really appreciated that type of cooperation and spirit throughout, so thank you all.
And I know I already thanked the committee, but I do have one more thank you. They didn't want to be on the committee list, but the three ladies at the back table there, who will be very embarrassed by that, but Jennifer, Krista, and Kylie, most importantly, they fed us every meeting and organized all that, had everything set up, the room set up, just all that behind the scenes work. Jennifer did all the emailing to the committee and sending everything back and forth with Phil, so just really appreciate all their support on making this a reality. And with that, if you don't have anything else, that is the entire presentation that we have for you tonight. All right.
Sorry, I just have one more question.
Sure.
So I was actually part of the 2017 Strategic Planning Committee just as a mom. And so obviously we're doing this again in 2024. Is there a plan for how long of a life cycle this will have? Or is this going to just kind of live in perpetuity until we've met goals? Like, what's the plan for that?
My hope is to keep it as, so we talked about chairs for each of the objectives, but I'm going to take the role as the chair of the plan and make sure that it continues to evolve. And so I think as we get to a point and things are met, he talked about 3 years typically, but I think instead of just abandoning this, it's pulling our committee back together and, maybe adding folks as we evolve and just getting input on what additional goals, or when we feel we've met, we can kind of share that out and replace. But I don't want to, I'd like to continue to use this one as best we can.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Next, and may I have a motion to enter into an executive session for the purpose of discussing the discipline and dismissal of public employees and the employment and compensation of public employees?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Marshall?
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. You may stay, but we're going to enter an executive session. We'll be back. All right. Well, thank you for staying. We are back. And may I have a motion to enter in?
You just returned.
Oh, okay. Just asked that. Everyone said yes. Okay. May I have a motion to approve the minutes of the regular Board of Education meeting held on Monday, June 24th?
So moved?
Second?
Any comments, questions? Okay. Ms. Marshall?
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Abstain.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And we have some public comments. So I'm just going to call up Mr. Doug Nichols. And just a reminder that you will have 5 minutes to address the board. Please state the agenda item that you're referencing at the beginning of your comments. A timer will be shown on the screens, and Mr. Doran will call time when 5 minutes has elapsed. Please keep your comments professional, avoid the use of inappropriate language, and refrain from identifying individuals in the event of a complaint. Please address your comments to the board and not the audience. And
Is the
welcome.
microphone on? Is the microphone on?
Yes.
Thank you. Good evening, Westerville Board of Education, District Treasurer, and incoming Superintendent. Congratulations. I'm here this evening to speak to you concerning Agenda Item 8.01. I'm asking the board members here to vote no on the resolution. The Franklin County Auditor's 2023 mass reappraisal values appear to be inconsistent. What are possible reasons why? The 60 appraisers used by the Franklin County Auditor to appraise 450,000 properties were not even from Franklin County. The process takes the auditor's office 2 to 2.5 years. If my math is correct, each appraiser spent 30 minutes or less appraising each property. Is that enough time to perform a quality appraisal? The Franklin County Auditor said his office began to use a computer-assisted mass appraisal system, or CAMA, in 2020. The 2023 mass reappraisal is only the second appraisal cycle in which CAMA has been used by the auditor's office. This is the first time it's being seriously questioned by citizens and news media alike. Auditor Stenziano said when the appraisers came around in Franklin County, they didn't even get out of their vehicles. Would it be fair to district taxpayers for you to base a significant 4.9 mil levy on property values arrived at through that kind of process without pausing long enough to examine it to be sure the levy request is set on a solid foundation of facts and accuracy? Treasurer Marshall has commented on a couple of occasions recently about the importance of apples-to-apples comparisons. Auditors, appraisers value both her property and my property at the same $183 per square foot in 2023. In 2020, the CAMA system valued my modest property at $129 a square foot, while valuing her higher-end property at only $101 per square foot. Treasurer Marshall seems to work extremely hard for her income. So by all appearances, her property is well-deserved for her and her family. At this time, there does not appear to me to be socioeconomic favoritism with the auditor's values. Inconsistencies seem to exist in wealthy and modest neighborhoods alike, often on the exact same street for no apparent reasons. They occurred all over the Westerville Schools Tax District. Many inconsistencies exist in your own neighborhoods. 2020 triennial appraisal values increased an average of 20%. 2023 mass reappraisal values were historically high, with the Westerville Tax District averaging a 38% increase. Your own neighborhood saw increases in the 50, 60, and even 80% ranges. One of your neighborhoods even had a property that increased 102%. Board Member Valentine, values on your street only varied from the 38% average.
Sir, do not call out individual members. That's part of what we say. You cannot, you can put whatever, just a person in there, but do not call out individual members. Do you understand?
I do.
Okay, thank you.
One of the board members that lives in Delaware County, their property only varied from the 38% average by plus or minus 6%, unlike the Franklin County properties. But that neighborhood was evaluated by the Delaware County auditor, which reasonably should only lead to more questions about the Franklin County evaluations. The Westerville Board of Education met on December 20th, 2019. The entire purpose of the meeting was to oppose the EdChoice voucher program. During the meeting, it was stated how important it was that data be interpreted accurately. Current board members, so I can't say names?
No,
Okay.
no.
There were 2 board members that are current that were in attendance at that meeting, as well as the treasurer. In the most recent board meeting, the treasurer noted the lack of accountability surrounding the EdChoice program. If accurately interpreted data and accountability are important regarding the EdChoice program, shouldn't they be equally important concerning property values a levy is based upon? Treasurer Marshall stated recently, "We do not have any say in values set by the county." Westerville schools don't have any say in the state's EdChoice voucher program either, but you're able to spend
Sir.
time and energy opposing it.
Can you please stop using people's names?
People's what?
Their names. You're supposed to be addressing the board.
I was given an email by the treasurer, so it's not fair game to use her name in an email that
It's
she sent me.
identifying individuals in the event of a complaint. So,
It's, the email wasn't a complaint, it was simply a communication with the district treasurer. Is that not transparency? We just heard that in the presentation
it's
that was
fine.
given.
It's fine.
Thank you. Westerville Schools doesn't have any say in the state's EdChoice voucher program either, but you're able to spend time and energy opposing it. You even appropriated funds at the last board meeting to join a lawsuit against the EdChoice program. I'm not expressing a viewpoint in favor of the EdChoice voucher program, nor one opposing it this evening. I'm simply asking you to invest an
Mr.
equitable
Nichols,
amount.
your time's up.
You've interrupted me several times. May I finish, please? I'm almost at the end.
You can have 5 more seconds.
Scott Reese said at the May 20th board meeting that 40% poverty level is in the student population. Homelessness is at an all-time high. Please seriously consider the question,
Thank you.
how will a levy of 4.9 mils
Mr.
impact those
Nichols.
families?
Thank you. Can you, if you want, you can leave your comments. Thank you. Next up, we have Miss Laura, and I'm going to pronounce this last name wrong. Huh? Emma Trace. Thank you. Just a reminder, there's 5 minutes, and please keep the comments professional.
Oh, it wasn't green. I am so nervous. Hi, thank you for allowing me to address you, board and Ms. Hamburg. We have a personal connection. My kids graduated from Big Walnut in 22 and 24, so welcome to Westerville. We're happy to have you. I'm Laura Emmertrace. I'm an intervention specialist at Faust Elementary. I'm also a level 1 dyslexia practitioner. I had a question on, it's 12.01, your strategic plan. On objective 1.4, it says that to implement recruiting, hiring, and retention practices to secure high-quality staff. Could you just help me understand how we're going to address that objective? I don't know if you've realized since May 20th, we've had 14 resignations of intervention specialists within the district. 6 resignations are on the docket tonight. We have 18 current openings for student support services. We've done some research on neighboring districts just to see what their intervention population looks like. Dublin has 0 openings, Olentangy has 2, Gahanna has 3, and New Albany has 0. But we have 18, so I'm really concerned about the retention of high-quality staff. It's a profession I'm in. I hold dear. I absolutely love what I do. I love my colleagues who are all supporting me. So I just have, general questions on what Westerville is doing specifically with objective point 1.4 to help us retain those high-quality staff members, when right now it's July 8th and we have 18 openings for student support services. So what are other districts doing to retain their staff that Westerville is not able to do? So, thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Moving along to 8.01, may I have a motion to approve the resolution to proceed with an issue of bonds and levy of an additional tax in excess of the 10 mil limitation and certifying the same to the bond of elections?
So moved?
Second.
Any discussion, comments?
You want me to talk about this?
Yes, please.
So as we have talked about leading up to this point, this is the final step in order for the district to be on the ballot in November. This is a combination, 2 questions, 1 vote ballot issue, a $140 million bond issue to be repaid over 37 years. It is estimated by the county auditor that the millage for that is 1.66 mils. We have bonds falling off in the future, so we are able to do this as a no new millage. With the addition of the capital projects fund that the board has allocated existing resources to, coupled with this bond issue, we do expect this to be a no new millage. It'll actually be a slight decrease based on the county auditor's estimates. In addition to that, we have a 4.9 mil operating levy that will generate about $20.8 million a year, and that is for a continuing period of time. And we have had a lot of conversation around the needs for this levy. We have expiring ESSER funds from the federal government. We also have seen significant cuts in our state funding. Well, we continue to be underfunded by the state. And we also don't see increases on our voted property taxes due to the effects of House Bill 920, as we've had many, many conversations about. In addition, we continue to see the same increases in costs that the rest of the world is seeing. As we all know, we're living in a high inflation time, and the cost of doing business is just great, along with the needs of our students continue to grow. I think our educators that are in the audience can probably attest to that. And so this was my recommendation that the board be on the ballot in November. The conversation around the millage, the estimated property values and all of those things, because of the way Ohio law works and House Bill 920, regardless of the value change, if the values were to decrease, if they weren't correct for some reason and the county was to come back and make some large decrease in property values, the millage for this ballot initiative, specifically for the operating piece, would never go above 4.9 mils. So that's the voted millage. It will never exceed that millage. For the bond issue, that is based on an amount up to $140 million. Should there be some drastic change in values, we would definitely want to reassess what that would mean to our community before moving forward with actually issuing bonds. I have spoken with the Franklin County Auditor's Office, and they're not aware of, they have nothing put out where they're evaluating, some mass change to what the 2023 reappraisals were. And as I've shared with the board previously, and in many community meetings, that while 38%, the average increase for homeowners in Franklin County was 38% in Westerville schools. The county auditor also shared with me that over 30% of the homeowners actually saw a decrease in their property tax bill due to the reappraisal updates. So that is how House Bill 920 works. We didn't invent the law. The county auditor didn't invent the law. It's been in place since the 1970s, and so that's what we have to live with today.
So just to connect those dots a little more and reemphasize what you said, so the millage could decrease, but it's not going to increase.
Yes.
And so if values continue under House Bill 920 to increase, that millage would fall back so that we collect roughly the same amount.
Yes.
Just to clarify.
Yes.
I raised some concerns when we began talking about the millage amounts, and I appreciate the comments that people have made to me and information that people have shared with me, and concerns and questions that are totally understandable. within the community when we began talking about going on the ballot. And I have weighed all of those and considered where we are and what we're all responsible for. A yes vote on my part on this is an acknowledgement of a number of changes that need to be addressed. In particular, I am thinking about the comments made by one of the speakers as we talk about certain vacancy levels that are higher than we want them to be. It's only my opinion, but I feel like we have been too thin too long in some of our areas where we have seen extensive growth in student need. We've not been able to stretch the dollars farther, even with ESSER funds or other components of funding that we have utilized. We've not been able to stretch the dollars far enough to provide the level of services that our student population now needs. It would be satisfying if I could look at the student population size and do a straight correlation to identification of how much should be spent overall on instruction and curriculum, on staffing, on facilities. That's not possible the way it might have been when I was a much younger person. Now we have layer upon layer of student need that has escalated beyond, I think, what any of us expected. This is a district that has experienced incredible demographic change. We are continuing to do that. And with that change and with societal changes, the needs of our students have increased to the point that I cannot in good conscience say that our current level of expenditure, our current level of income, allows us to meet those student needs appropriately. It is a big ask. It's an important ask. And I am focusing my particular vote on what is it that we actually need to do to meet the needs of the students in our school district. Because meeting the needs of the students in our school district actually meets the needs of every single person in the school district as a whole. That's what I wanted to share with you. It is a messy, layered look at all of our income and all of our expenditures, and I have come down on the side of yes.
Meeting those needs, which are real and growing, is what weighs most heavily on me with this particular issue. And, you know, I know people know that I live in this district, but I like to point out I have several households of family members who will also be subject to paying, you know, additional taxes. And so I think about them. Some are retired, some have small children. And so this is weighed on both a district-wide level and knowing the needs of, I mean, we know that some of our families are in really difficult circumstances. And some people are on limited income. So it is never easy to ask for more money. It is never easy. But the needs are real, and we will all pay for it down the line if we don't take care of kids now. And so I have listened, and I listened to financial analysis and the needs analysis. And so, you know, I'm supportive of this for those reasons. It's never easy to ask for more. And so, Ms. Marshall, I know we all know the answer to this question, but just to be clear, there is no other way to fund meeting those needs, correct? Besides going back to the community and asking for.
Yeah, the school funding system in Ohio has put districts in a place that our only option is to go to our local community to make up any shortfalls that we have in revenues and needs.
Yep, and that's where we are. So thank you for everyone in the district who has done the careful analysis and sharing of needs and expressing the needs that continue to exist. And this is where we are. So, thanks.
just add to that. I think also what's really challenging is our General Assembly continues to try to strip away funding and continues to put a lot of stipulations and requirements on school districts. And so that adds another layer of needs and funding needs. And so as my colleagues have said, I know we all have been listening and doing work sessions over the past year and a half, listening to the needs of the school district, or even longer, but, you know, doing that publicly in these work sessions and listening to the financials. And so it is something that we do very thoughtfully, knowing all of these other, you know, other people's lived experience and where they are.
So,
Yeah.
I'm trying not to talk. Just right when Jen and I came back from executive session, the last 5 years, and sitting, like, looking at educators out there, the dynamics of our school district have changed from COVID. Just the needs, I can't even express, and I'm not in the classroom every day, but the needs that our kids are coming to school with and that our staff members have on top of it. I feel like we are good fiscal stewards, and we will continue to do that and to ask good questions. But at the end of the day, this is our job. I am fully supportive. I appreciate all the due diligence that the community has done, that our staff has done. But I always, you know, I want to invest in our kids, in our community. So thank you.
I will echo the sentiments that my fellow board members have mentioned, and I especially want to stress the point that President Myers made about if we don't want to have these levies over and over and over again, the state legislature has to do its job to fund public education at the level that is prescribed by our state constitution. If that does not happen, this continues to happen. Now, it has been 5 years since the last levy. I think we have stretched it as far as it will go. I believe Ms. Marshall and her team try very hard to not have us on the ballot. But with the increase in the prices of everything, those prices also, that affects the school district as well. If you are paying more for groceries, the school district is paying more for food for the kids for breakfast and lunch as well. So, you know, it's been a compilation of all of these things that kind of lead to having to be on the ballot and having to go back to the voters again and ask, you know, we need more for our kids. And I think for me personally, I have a little one who, you know, started his journey in the Westerville City Schools right downstairs in the ELC. He's been on an IEP for K through 5, and it had been heartbreaking the first couple years at his school, you know, kindergarten and the first grade teachers emailing my husband and I, like, he had another outburst today, he had a meltdown. There were no aides to help them. So you've got 25, 26 kindergartners in a room, one teacher, and another 1 or 2 maybe that have extra needs. How do you balance that? It's really difficult, and I'm sure those who are there can attest to it being super difficult. So, as everyone has said, as the needs of our kids has changed, we have to be able to keep up with that, because if we don't, those problems don't fix themselves, and they will surface later on. So, I am in support of this levy. Like we said, it's never easy to ask for money. When I was, you know, a teenager, asking my mom for like money to go to the movies was hard. This is a much bigger ask, but I am supportive of this because the children who are going to graduate from our programs are going to go on to become, you know, the engineers and the doctors and the designers and performers of the future that we're going to be interacting with for the rest of our lives. And I want to make sure that we give them the education they deserve in order to be those productive and happy adults later in life.
Ms. Marshall?
Ready to vote?
Yep, ready to vote.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. May I have a motion to approve the resolution to proceed with oh, sorry, I'm reading the wrong one. May I have a motion to approve the resolution for the agreement for deposit of public funds in First Commonwealth Bank?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Marshall?
Yes, thank you, President Meyer, members of the board. So this is just a follow-up from the last meeting, our actual agreement with the First Commonwealth Bank, which is our current banking services.
Any questions, comments? Ms. Marshall, will you take the vote?
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes, and may I have a motion to approve the personal consent agenda 9.01 through 9.14?
So moved. Second.
And welcome, Mr. Cooper.
Good evening, President Meyer, Vice President Altman, members of the board, Ms. Marshall, and Interim Superintendent Ms. Hamburg. This evening's personnel consent agenda includes action items with regard to resignations, retirements, leave of absences, contract status changes, one-time pays, and other employment-related decisions. We have 2 staff members who have announced their retirement on this evening's agenda. Deanna Cathy is retiring after 23 years of service to the district, and Connie Brown after 38 years of service to Westerville City Schools. We appreciate all they have done for our students, staff, and community, and certainly wish them the best in their years of retirement ahead. I would like to note a few administrative items on this evening's agenda that are recommended for your approval. Within item 9.01, I would like to call out the resignation of Greg Vibrance as our Chief Communications Officer. We appreciate Greg's 18 years of service to Westerville City Schools, leading our communications department, and certainly wish him the best in his retirement ahead. Under classified contract status changes, it's recommended that Charlie Boss, current Communications and Community Engagement Coordinator, be reclassified as an administrator and continue her leadership in the Communications Department. And Charlie is here tonight. Welcome, Charlie. Under licensed contract status changes, it is recommended that Janice McAlpine, current Assistant Principal at Minerva France Elementary, fill the role of Director of Educational Equity. And I see Janice back there in the audience tonight. Thank you for being here, Janice. And it's also with great excitement that I highlight the board's resolution this evening to employ Angela Hamburg as superintendent. Our administrative team is thrilled to be able to work with Angie, given her teaching and leadership experience, her forward-thinking vision, and unwavering focus on students at the center of every decision. Finally, I'd like to give you a brief update on some of our hiring so far this summer. While summer for school buildings usually means quieting down, a little time for reflection and planning for the year ahead, it is one of the busiest times in HR. As you know, we've committed to hiring several new FTEs, specifically in our highest need areas for EL teachers and intervention specialists. To date, we've filled all of our English language teacher positions. That's 12 new FTE to the district for this coming school year, and 20 new hires of intervention specialists. Those 20 intervention specialist positions fill all of the open vacancy positions from a number standpoint, and actually net additional FTE to our district that have already been hired. So I know there have been some questions with that tonight, so I just want to clarify that piece there. We do still have a few openings of IS positions. 4 of those have been offered just today. I also want to note just major appreciation for our administrative team, especially our EL department and our special education department. They've been working since December on hiring positions, knowing that we are going to add FTEs for this coming school year. So just appreciate all of the work that they have put in, the hours and hours of interviews since December for this, and just the amount of time and effort that they put into growing this support for our students. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those at this time.
Any questions? We're going to vote on Angie's contract separately. Okay?
You can vote on it separately?
Yeah, please. So the motion was for 9.01 through 9.14.
Okay.
Sorry. All right.
Can I say something just about Greg?
Yeah.
Greg, I know you're not leaving yet, But, you've been leading up to this for a while. It hasn't been much of a surprise as you've put all the things that you've put out there on Facebook. I've been following them and then running and hiding my head under a pillow and yelling, no, 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 no. You have been a rock, not just for this district, but for all of Central Ohio, in all of the work you've done. I admired you and your professionalism long before you came here, and I was delighted when you came to Westerville. I am not delighted to see you go, although I know that what you have put in place here and the people that are stepping into the roles will carry on what you've done. But I thank you.
I would just thank you, Greg. I was a little shocked to see that again, but excited for you and excited for Charlie and Janice, so I'm excited for these new roles too. Yeah.
There you go.
Yep.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And may I have a resolution to employ Miss Angela Angie Hamburg as our superintendent?
So moved.
Second?
Any comments?
Angie, we're so excited you're here. I can't even express. So it's a long time in coming. We're excited about the future and your outlook on the entire district and how much you are student-focused and you care about staff and our community. And so I just can't say welcome enough. Thank you.
And the fact that you jumped into the strategic planning process on day 3, not everyone could do that. And we've ended up with a really useful document. So I know that that's only a piece of the job, but it's an important one because it's sort of our guideposts, moving forward. So thank you for I know it was a lot of work just to sort of get up to speed and be able to run that process. So thank you for that. And I know. Thank you, everyone else, for making that so successful. But I'm just thrilled that you're here. Thank you. So, thanks.
I'm going to layer on. I'm really excited that you're here. And I just appreciate how collaborative you've been and how you hit the ground running at day 1. Yes, you had a lot of support and help, but it's just really the feedback we've been hearing from the community, the feedback that we've been hearing from buildings. It's just really, really nice and really appreciate it, and excited to see what's next. So thank you.
Ditto.
Right?
It is a tough time to be a superintendent, everywhere, not just here. It's a tough time in the superintendency. And I'm delighted that you've chosen to make a home here. We are going to be in good hands with you. I do not doubt it for a moment. I'm excited. This is good stuff. Just as I was yelling, no, 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 with Greg's statements, I was yelling, yes, 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 when you were willing to step in and, on an interim basis, see what you thought of us and what we thought of you. And now it's time to go full speed ahead. Thank you for being willing to be here.
Would you like to introduce your family members real quick? Since they drove all this way.
Yes, so I am, I was going to say, they will be very embarrassed, but my sister-in-law, Tammy Sisko, and her daughter, my niece, Sydney Sisko, are here from about 2 hours away from St. Mary's, where my husband's family still lives. So appreciate them being here tonight to support me. Thank you.
Yep.
Are you ready to vote?
Yep.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. May I have a motion to approve the student handbooks for the 24-25 school year?
So moved.
Second?
Any questions, comments? We're all excited, sorry. We're all just really excited.
I assume we had no substantial.
We have not received any feedback
okay.
since the first reading. So if you don't have anything additional tonight.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes, there's no new business. Next, we have standing business, and can we take it as one?
I think it is.
Or okay, I'm sorry. Okay, let's take it. May I have a motion to approve the strategic plan?
So moved.
Second?
Oh, any questions or comments? Any questions or comments? Okay. Ms. Marshall?
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And may I have a motion to approve the resolution for impracticality of transportation?
So moved.
Second.
And welcome, Ms. Dennis.
Good evening, President Meyer, Vice President Altman, members of the board, Superintendent Hamburg, and Treasurer Marshall. Ohio Revised Code allows for public schools to determine the impracticality of transportation after consideration of a number of factors, including but not limited to the cost of providing transportation.
The mic's
Carry your
not on.
mic.
Okay. There's a lot of like gesturing out there, It's like this and that.
Even after 4 children, I never got those. I work on that one. We can start again. Good evening. We'll just start there. Ohio Revised Code allows for public schools to determine the impracticality of transportation after consideration of a number of factors, including but not limited to the cost of providing transportation and the number of students to be transported. The Department of Purchasing and Logistics has evaluated the listed private school student per the requirements of Section 3327.02 of the Ohio Revised Code and declared the student impractical to transport. Approving this resolution will allow the district to offer payment in lieu of transportation in the manner provided for per the Ohio Revised Code at the rate set by the Ohio Department of Education and Workforce. It is being recommended that the Board of Education approve declaring the listed student impractical for transportation and offering payment in lieu of transportation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And may I have a motion to approve out-of-state overnight field trips?
So moved.
Second.
And welcome, Ms. Baldwin.
All right. Good evening, President Meyer, members of the board, Superintendent Hamburg, and Mrs. Marshall. This evening, you'll see a date change for an out-of-the-country field trip, as the date for the cultural immersion trip to Italy was inadvertently added to a previous agenda as March 26th. And they're actually leaving March 29th, and students will not miss any days of school. So we want to make sure that was correct, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Marshall?
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And may I have a motion to approve the settlement agreement?
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Marshall?
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. And we have no public comments, so moving along to board comments. Who would like to go first?
I can go first. First, I want to say a quick apology to our speaker for my tone. I'd like to explain that in the past, when names have been used at the podium, it does impact our families and our homes. So you did not know that, but I need for you to know that because it does hurt our families. So I'm going to move on from there. Greg, you will be deeply missed. You are always there. I think this last 2 years, we've had a lot of people leaving that truly impacts our district. This will be one that the community will notice. So you will be missed. To our FAUST staff that showed up tonight, thank you. Thank you for coming. It's so nice to see people come and engaged and share concerns in a thoughtful way. So I respect that. And just one more thank you to our strategic plan members and the impact group for all that you've done. Thank you.
Well, I'll just say you know, Board of Education meetings sometimes on the surface, they might look a little bit less than exciting sometimes. But there's actually there was a lot tonight. I mean, if you really listen, I appreciate those of you who are here taking the time to speak, taking the time to share, because there's a lot going on. So, Greg, we wish you all the best, right? We really do. And welcome to Janice and new role. And I just want to welcome Superintendent Hamburg. Thank you for being here. And some really important conversations about asking for more resources to do what we need to do for kids. So thanks for speaking up.
Like Jen said, we had a lot of really big topics tonight, a strategic plan for the next however many years. Angie, so excited to have you as our superintendent. And then, like we've talked about, more resources for all of the things that we need for our kids. And while that's a lot, I'm really excited actually for the next school year, because this provides a lot of opportunity. And I'm just really excited to see where we go from here.
I've said enough.
I'm just gonna say ditto. I'm just excited for where we're heading. Really appreciate all the work, appreciate the comments, I appreciate people asking questions, really do. But just really excited for the future and where we're heading. So thank you all. And with that, the board will meet in regular session on Monday, August 12th, 2024 at 6 p.m. at the Early Learning Center, which is here. And for those online, it's 936 Eastwind Drive, Westerville, Ohio. And with that, may I have the motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Ms. Marshall?
Mrs. Valentine?
Yes.
Mrs. Davidson?
Yes.
Dr. Nestor Baker?
Yes.
Mrs. Altman?
Yes.
Mrs. Meyer?
Yes. Thank you.
7:53.